Nurses of Reddit, what is your funniest emergency room story? Not my story, but heard it from my cousin. She was training for her nurse diploma at the time at a local hospital. So there is this old guy, 70 to 80, coming in the ER with a big wound on his leg, and he had to go for surgery. My cousin tried to prepare him for the surgery and asked him to remove his boots and clothes so he can change into proper clothing. The old guy started yelling and cursing because he didn't want to get his boots off. Several doctors came by to calm him, and he started to fight them too. After some time, when he calmed down, they injected him some anesthetic in order to remove his boots without him flipping over. It turns out he was ashamed to take them off because he had his nails painted red. I used to work in the ER sometimes, and when we would pull stuff out of people's buttholes, it would get washed and sterilized and put in this box under the triage desk. When a new person started, we would run a poll on who could get the newbie to use something out of the box first. I won it once by taking the staples out of his stapler and then casually mentioning that, hey, there is a stapler in the box under the triage desk. I won $150 that day. So, someone crammed a stapler up their butt. I'm not sure how to feel about that. People cram everything up their butts. I work inpatient, but here are some stories. The patient had a UTI. She told me that a previous nurse had told her to wipe front to back, and how ridiculous that was, as she had wiped back to front her whole life and was fine. I asked her if she had ever had a UTI before. She said, oh yeah, all the time. Had a patient who was coming down off of meth. He insisted that he had been kidnapped because a hold had been placed for very valid concerns about violent behavior. He called 911 and said he had been kidnapped. The police arrived to make sure everything was alright, make sure that someone hadn't actually been kidnapped. When the patient saw the police's response was not "I have been kidnapped, please help," but to try and attack the police. We managed to disengage him without anyone getting hurt. As soon as they left, he demanded to use the phone to report his kidnapping. Not my story, but here it goes. Couple arrive late night in the ER. Him with a bleeding sore penis, her with multiple head injuries and a burned back. After being treated, they eventually tell the story to the puzzled nurses. He was frying eggs when she decided to surprise him with a BJ. During the action, he dropped the eggs on her back. She bit him, and he started banging her head with the pan to stop. My cousin is a nurse at a hospital that provides the medical care for a major city's inmate population. Her first week there, she was going to give a prisoner some kind of vaccination. The deputy guarding the door opened it for her to find that the inmate was gone. After a little bit of sleuthing, they saw the drop ceiling tiles wiggling a little bit. She said she stepped back, and two deputies and a police officer grabbed brooms and mops from the janitor's closet and started jabbing up into the ceiling until the escapee fell out head first onto one of the deputies. She said they both ended up with a concussion. I once took care of someone who registered with a complaint of suspected latex allergic reaction. This happens periodically, and for whatever reason seems to more often present with lips and tongue symptoms after a condom was used during oral sex. However, it must have not been bad, because the nurses didn't signal to me that this patient needed to be seen ahead of the others waiting. If you are waiting in the ED, that's a good thing. It means the nurses think you are less sick. Eventually I work my way through to her and enter the room to see a woman sleeping peacefully covered with a man's jacket while the man stands against the far wall. She wakes easily. Examining her, she's clearly not having hives or anaphylaxis or contact allergy, but she does have an odd, fine, flat red rash around her eyes and upper cheeks. They are very hesitant about explaining what was going on. They nearly always are. but it eventually comes out that they had vaginal intercourse with a condom, then removed the condom, and she gave him oral sex. Then she went to the bathroom and saw the rash. This wasn't making sense. It wasn't an infection, or abrasion, or an allergy. In fact, the rash looked petechial, which means tiny burst blood vessels under the skin. Oh wait. This is where I pull out my best trick and squint at them. Consider what I think they were doing. Dial the kink up 3 notches and matter-of-factly ask if they were doing that. With excellent eye contact. This resets the hurdle for embarrassment and gets people to open up. So, no, they hadn't been doing breath play or choking, but yes, there was some forceful gagging during the oral sex. The part that made it funny was that this was clearly either a paid encounter or a Tinder hookup, because the dynamic between them was so fastidiously polite. I'm a midwife, and during my training I had to do 2 weeks in A&E, accident and emergency, the British version of the ER. We wore a brightly colored lanyard that said student midwife to identify us over our scrubs. One shift the nurse I was shadowing was about to walk into a young, about 17-ish, female patient who had presented with severe abdominal pain and asked me to do some baseline observations. I walked into the bay and introduced myself as a student midwife, and the patient starts bawling her eyes out and freaking out before I could get another word out. The nurse runs in to calm her down and asks her a bunch of questions, but this girl was crying so hard it took forever to get her to a calm state. Turns out the poor girl saw/heard the word midwife and thought I was there because she was pregnant. Turns out the abdominal pain wasn't pregnancy, and after she calmed down and more tests were being done, we had a good laugh that she thought we knew she was pregnant without us actually having done any pregnancy test on her yet. She saw the funny side, but holy shit. Not a nurse, just a former admin person, but once upon a time a guy came into the ER with a dildo up his bum. So far they couldn't do anything but send him to a bigger hospital. They're about to put him into the ambulance to transport him to the regional hospital, and the surgeon comes to talk to the guy before he leaves. The surgeon says it's going to be okay and they'll get him taken care of at the regional hospital. The patient seems to get it, but right as the surgeon is about to leave he says, "Hey doc, if you can't get it out, can you at least turn it off?" No one knew it was vibrating too. Nurse here. We had a young patient come in, female, 20 years. She was very weird, shaking and couldn't stand. She looked anorexic. Now, since she was puking, we had to give her an IV drip. So we placed that in, and I watch over her in the ER room. And there is a door next to the bed she was on that leads to the outside for easier access of the ER room if there is an emergency. So I look at her and ask if she is okay, and she is sitting up and goes, "Yeah, I'm fine." Mind you, she couldn't move for the past 30 minutes and we literally had to carry and lift her up. Now she is sitting there and has this dead stare in her eyes. My coworker steps closer to the room, and as he is about to ask if everything is fine, this girl rips the IV drip out of her, jumps over everything in her way, opens the door and runs outside. Now this is a smaller town with a small ER unit, and there I am, 5'1" tall woman, chasing that skinny girl over the whole town. She was in nothing but a bra and pants because of ECG, in the middle of winter. Behind me was my coworker, 2 paramedics, 1 paramedic car, 3 cops, our doctor with dispatch on the phone. And we were chasing her for a good hour. Everything turned out fine, and she was admitted to the hospital the second we caught her. Nothing bad happened, thank God. But it sure was funny, since we were filmed and put on national TV under breaking news. We still get a good laugh out of it every once in a while. Not me, but my mom is a nurse. She has a newly diagnosed diabetic come in, and she had to explain how to inject insulin. My mom used an orange to demonstrate how to inject it, and the guy said he understood, and that was the end of it. The guy comes back a week later, and his diabetes has gotten worse. She asked him to tell him about how he had been doing injecting it. The guy had bought oranges and injected them with insulin, and then ate the oranges. I don't understand people sometimes. I work on a telemetry floor, which is basically all the monitors with heart rate and vital signs such as oxygen. So I was watching another nurse's patient and his oxygen started to get lower. Now take note, that oxygen is monitored by a thing you wear on your finger and can give false readings when your finger is bent. So I go see this patient, and he's just happily jerking off. I just walked out and started laughing. We were having a shitty night, so it gave all the nurses and doctors something to laugh about, lol. My sister's a nurse, and her favorite stories are lost her patient in a backless hospital gown, and I've polled the whole floor and security searching for this guy for a good 30 minutes. She gets on elevator, and there he is, with a bucket of Church's chicken. He had left hospital, crossed street, and stood in line to buy chicken with his butt hanging out. Psych patient somehow made it through 2 locked wards and outside, naked. He was chased by 2 huge male nurses, 3 female nurses, and a doctor. Made it off the property, where the local PD had to take up the chase. The hospital is in the middle of town, so everybody got a show. I had a 19-year-old girl come in for nausea/vomiting in the morning for a few days. I asked her if she was pregnant, and she said no. My boyfriend pulls out. Boy, with aim for a surprise.